Keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling and flare. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch the scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it, so explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it, no scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool, hear my heartbeat, beat into the vocals. I'm so loco, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones, bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock, like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on UCY.tv and the antimedia.org/radio. Welcome back. I'm really happy to be back with you guys and, alive and well, surviving in our first episode of the Trump era. This is going to be a roller coaster ride for sure. I mean, obviously this first weekend has been just one huge clump of information that we're going to have to decode, and we're going to try to move through it quickly because, now that we're in the age of Trump, I really want to start breaking through and start talking about philosophies and ideas, because it's pretty clear at this point that we're in this binary of old ways of thinking. Trump with his protectionism, nationalism, and the Democrats with whatever it is they're doing right now. I don't even think they know what they're doing right now, but the U.S. has grown stale. Our ideas are old. They're not working for most people. And I was asking one of my friends, in fact, you guys may know him, Luke Calgiovanni. I'm terrible with his last name. He was here over the weekend, and we were hanging out, and me and him have pretty different political perspectives, although we have a lot of common ground. We were just, talking about how there's a huge vacuum for philosophy. Like, can you guys name any young philosophers out there that are putting out really good ideas and that people are resonating with? There are some, but there's not that many. And, that's something that we're lacking. We need to make philosophy cool again. And so that's what I want to start focusing on this radio show, is, more philosophy and less news, and of course the antimedia.org is a news outlet, and, there's all kinds of news if you want to go to the antimedia.org and check out the news stories. Of course, we're still going to talk about news, especially the really big stories. The first parts of the show, we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to try to get philosophers on the show, or people with ideas, people that can debate ideas. And we don't want to just make an echo chamber of, okay, we're only going to have these type of ideas on the show. No, we're going to try to bring a clash of ideas, let the ideas fight themselves, and let's see where the chips fall. That's what I want our new show to be. Anyway, that's what we're going to try to do in the Trump era, and I guess just see how it plays out. We're going to find out. Anyway, Jake, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Good. I'm doing well. I think it's a good idea to bring philosophy into the fold. To answer your question, I think a lot of philosophers these days are. I mean, in many people's views, science has overtaken philosophy, and we live in this just increasingly materialistic world, and I mean materialistic in the scientific or in a dialectical way, in terms of, you know, most people, you know, are not spiritual anymore. Most people believe that the world can be explained by science, and that extends to the social sciences as well. So I think basically we've seen philosophy hit some dead ends in terms of what more can be covered through philosophy. And I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson, that's his name. I can never get his name right, but he famously castigated philosophy and said, you know, philosophy is dead. There's no new philosophical ideas. And I think you're right. I think he's wrong. I think we're about to see a renaissance in philosophy as the fields of science, you know, as science further reveals that there's a lot that we cannot explain with the scientific method.
Yeah, man, and you know, he's right in some ways. Philosophy is kind of, you know, started to die off, and that's what we need to start reviving, because the reason I think why the U.S. is at such a crossroads right now, and why so many people are frustrated, and exactly why so many people supported Donald Trump and why so many people supported Bernie Sanders, is people are looking for answers. And since there isn't any really new philosophies coming out that are or at least being publicized that are promising, people are turning back to these older ideas of, like with Trump, where it's like a national corporatism type of mentality, or with Bernie Sanders, a nationalistic kind of socialistic mentality. You know, these are ideas that have been tried out a long time ago, and even though they didn't end with the greatest success, it's pretty clear that this current paradigm of globalist, predatory capitalism has failed the majority of people. Like, most people are struggling to pay their bills. Most people don't have any savings. Most young people don't own homes like our parents used to. And so people have pretty much realized, okay, the current system is failing, so let's look for something new. Well, since nothing new is being, you know, put forward, let's try something old. And that's basically why Trump got elected, I think. And so, you know, there are a bunch of young philosophers, and, you know, being in the industry that we're in, we're actually kind of in a echo chamber of philosophy. And so we may like think that, oh, you know, philosophy is pretty common, but you know what, like, the average person, if you go out and ask them, like, oh, who's a philosopher you admire, I guarantee you they're going to just look at you with like this blank stare, and they're going to be like, maybe if they went to college, they might say, oh, Noam Chomsky's pretty cool. But Noam Chomsky's like, how old? 80, 90? I mean, the guy's getting really old. We need some young ideas, young philosophers to come forward to address the issues of the younger generations. You know, Trump is pushing 80. Bernie Sanders is pushing 80. Ron Paul is pushing 90, I think. You know, like, what I'm saying here is that the thinkers are getting really old, man. And we need some young thinkers to come on. And I want this show to be a showcase, a platform for young thinkers. And I don't care if they're extremely controversial, radical, extreme. I want to showcase ideas and let the ideas, you know, let the ideas battle each other. So we're going to try to work towards that, and while of course still maintaining some sort of a news program here. So first, let's get into the news. And I think DB is going to be joining us a little bit later. He's running a little late. First of all, Obama's gone. Jake, what is Obama's legacy to you?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
Huge question, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be, I mean, right now, I would say his legacy is, God, I don't know. I mean, continuation of the surveillance state, for better or for worse. I would argue for worse, because nothing else is going to stay. You know, Obamacare is going to be most likely repealed. TPP, which he spent a lot of time on, has already been flushed away by Trump.
Thing that we've been on our show, we've been pretty much against the TPP. So
yeah, well, it was a good thing, and I posted today. I mean, I think there's probably going to be very, very few times where I praise Trump. So I figured today I would take the time to say that that was a good thing he did. Although I don't think he did it for the right reasons. He did it for nationalistic trade reasons that I don't think is going to actually help. Instead of the reasons that I think it should have been rejected, which is because it, basically outsourced environmental laws to corporate tribunals, and it made intellectual property rights very, very scary power granted to patent holders over people that would seek to break in, jailbreak, and make things better through open source type things. So there's a lot of things wrong with TPP. TPP was a train wreck, and yeah, I'm happy as hell that it's not passing. A lot of people were telling me today, well, it was virtually dead in the Congress. Well, okay, whatever. I mean, some people, there's literally nothing you can say to them that there isn't something negative that they come back with. But the fact of the matter is, environmentally, Trump is going to be a nightmare. So I don't, it's hard to sing the praises of that too much. But as far as Obama's legacy, I'm not sure there's going to be one. I think probably just having a constitutional intellect in the White House is probably going to be his legacy. I mean, he's, whatever that granted us, he's a smart man, and he probably, crafted a very careful legal framework around what he was doing with drones, around what he was doing with everything. And I think he tried to do some good things, but I mean, ultimately, I'm not sure. I think that's the problem. Is you ask people what Obama's legacy is, I'm not sure that there's going to be an immediate response to that, especially once healthcare is repealed. But I mean, Obama spent a lot of time on TPP. Let's not forget that. That was a huge project of his that he was spearheading. So for that to be flushed away on basically day 2. With Obamacare, also an executive action that's, what was the executive action by Trump is something very strange. It was like, easing the burden of the Obamacare repeal. I think that was the actual wording of it. It was very strange.
Yeah, it was a very toothless. To me, it was a symbolic kind of executive. Well, I'm going to do an executive order against Obamacare on day 1, and it's like, okay, here's my executive order, even though it doesn't really mean shit.
But what's funny is that Obama is coming in and doing the exact thing that I wish Obama had done. Like, 8 years ago, when I was a enthusiastic Obama supporter, I had these fantasies of him coming into office and immediately issuing these huge executive orders, because if you remember the time frame of that was right after the Bush era, and I just had these fantasies that he was going to come in and immediately issue these executive orders and immediately start to rein in government. And here you have Trump doing that, but of course he's doing it in a way that I wouldn't want, in terms of some of the social funding that he's going to try and do away with, in terms of things like Planned Parenthood and whatnot. But he definitely has they said that he was going to try and do a shock and awe approach to his first few days in terms of issuing these executive orders. And I think he's largely shoring up his base and shoring up his support right now. Even his speech, his Inauguration Day speech even, was basically devoted to his followers. It was a shockingly nationalistic speach. And the question now is, the question everyone has to ask is, what is going to be the transition of the war and the surveillance state between Obama and Trump. Trump has already basically said that he's going to continue the same surveillance state policies. I think I read that on Activist Post. And
and there's already been drone strikes under Trump, at least.
I saw that today. I was going to ask you about that. So where was the drone strike?
Again, these haven't been 100% confirmed, but suspected U.S. drone strikes in Yemen, of course, against supposed terrorists. Keep in mind that a terrorist, according to the U.S. government, where they're dropping drone strikes, is any male within fighting age, which basically means if you're 13 to like an old man, you're considered a terrorist if a drone bomb hits you. So, Trump has not and is not going to. It doesn't seem like he's going to roll back the drone warfare program, which is basically a global war that's, in my opinion, very cowardly and in many ways extrajudicial, illegal, unconstitutional. And he's not, doesn't look like he's planning on rolling back the surveillance, massive mass surveillance system either. So in those ways, I mean, the deep state remains intact. Going back to the initial question about Obama, of course, nobody's fully bad, nobody's fully good. I think Obama, to me, he was pretty good on like social issues, same-sex marriage, that kind of stuff.
That's it. Sorry to interrupt, but I forgot about that. That's his legacy. His work on giving rights to the LGBTQ community is definitely his legacy. That's where he accomplished the most.
Definitely. And then, he also paid a lot of lip service to, elevating the minorities and also, elevating the poor and stuff. But unfortunately, he basically didn't change anything economically for people. In fact, inequality just got worse. And unemployment for minorities is extremely bad. The gap between the rich and the poor has grown even worse than before Obama took office. So rhetorically he was pretty good as far as like, okay, yeah, I'm a great, I'm like a Robin Hood type of guy, but in reality he was like Robin Hood for the rich. The rich got a lot richer, the poor got basically poorer, and the middle class shrunk. So I think Obama, really his main strength on his legacy is going to be on like social issues. But again, when it comes to a lot of the stuff that really, really matters, he was kind of ineffective, or he was bad. To me, my biggest beef with Obama is that he strengthened the executive branch, and that to me is very worrisome. Obviously, executive orders have been around for a long time, but Obama strengthened the ability to write executive orders. Obviously, Trump comes in day one, starts writing them. A day before Trump took office, Republicans were against executive orders. How many times did you see people who are leaning conservative like, oh, Obama's a dictator, he's writing everything with executive order, blah, 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 blah. Trump gets elected, the very next day, they're like, we love executive orders because our guy is doing them. Okay. Hypocrisy. Anyway, that's beside the point. Obama strengthened the executive branch greatly. I don't know. I don't know when the last president was that strengthened it that much. I'm sure it probably went back to around World War II or so. But Obama basically codified the ability for the executive to assassinate U.S. citizens, to detain U.S. citizens on U.S. soil without trial, and to more or less wage perpetual warfare in any country they deem terrorists exist. So,
I mean, the Bush administration established a lot of that. I mean,
yeah, the Patriot Act, did a lot in that way, but Obama really quietly pushed the limits because he had basically no opposition, because Republicans kind of already agree with that stuff. Normally, it's like Democrats that are raising a fuss about extrajudicial military actions and stuff, but since it was a Democratic president, there was no Democrats to oppose him, so he kind of got away with whatever he wanted, codified it into law, and now hands it off to Trump. Now Trump could basically assassinate U.S. citizens around the world wherever he wants, as long as he just says they're terrorists ahead of time. They don't have to be put on trial. No evidence has to be presented. That's how it was done in Yemen against Anwar al-Awlaki. And so now Trump has those powers, and now all of a sudden, I think we're going to see Democrats starting to wonder, like, oh, maybe it's not a good idea that Trump has these powers, because, I don't know if we should be able to just wage war and assassinate U.S. citizens wherever the hell we want. Yeah, maybe that's why you guys should have been with us and tried to oppose it while your guy was in office, but you didn't. So, that's just unfortunate. So I think that's where Obama's legacy is going to start showing itself throughout the Trump presidency, when Trump starts doing stuff that may be legally questionable, and then they're going to start looking back at citing Obama's precedent that he set.
But liberals won't learn from that. The liberals won't. They won't connect the dots and realize that Obama paved the way for it. They'll just see Trump as the ultra evil guy. And per your Facebook post earlier, you're right. Just the binary partisanship that's going on right now. It's just almost unbelievable hypocrisy of what's going on right now. Like how it's I've truly never seen such role reversals in such a short period of time.
It really blows my mind, dude. It blows my mind. And I've had several people, saying, oh well, these Democrats are bullshit. They weren't doing anything the day before yesterday, and blah 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 blah. It's like, I agree. I mean, it is hypocritical that the Democrats or the liberals were just sitting around on their hands for the last 8 years, while Obama was waging wars in like 8 different countries and bailing out Wall Street and, doing all the things that Obama did that that would likely go against liberal principles. But at the same time, I'm not going to discourage liberals. I see so many people out there like trying to discourage the fact that liberals are now standing up to the government. I'm not going to discourage that. I'm going to encourage it. It's like, you guys may have been asleep for the last 8 years, but welcome to the party. Let's oppose this shit together. And at the same time, I'm not going to be surprised when Republicans or conservatives become the bootlicking party and say, well, you can't question our president. That's un-American. It's unpatriotic. That's what they're going to be. I'm not going to be surprised by that. I'm not. I just hope that some of these guys have a little more principle or maybe learned a little something, and they will, if their guy does something bad or stupid, they'll actually have the principle to question it. Maybe I'm being optimistic here, but I'm hoping that that's what happens. Ridiculous.
Yeah. People in general are pretty myopic in their views, and I'm seeing very, very little self-reflection among and I have a lot of Democrat friends. A lot. Well over half my Facebook friends supported Hillary Clinton. Even the ones who were Bernie supporters, they're still kind of tied up in the liberal rhetoric and whatnot. And that's where I cut my teeth. That's where I kind of started to learn about politics. So part of me is still there as well in principle, but it's almost unbelievable the lack of self-reflection over the last 8 years, and it extends directly into the Democratic National Committee. And I read an article today about the soul searching that's going on. The Democrats the committee had a really big meeting either today or yesterday, where they were trying to piece together what went wrong on this election cycle. And they did isolate the fact that they need to reach out to working class people and take an interest in real economic growth. But besides that, there is still so little clarity among the Democrats of what they're doing wrong and what they're even trying to do. And the best example of it is when Nancy Pelosi a few weeks back came right out and said that the Democrats don't need to change anything, that they're on the right track. They, a good chunk of the party still just thinks they got screwed by the FBI and WikiLeaks, and and then there was a report that Bernie Sanders got the cold shoulder from Hillary Clinton at one of the dinners over the weekend, and that he kind of stood around waiting to talk to her, and she purposely snubbed him. And then there's still this contingent of Democrats that really doesn't think the party needs to change. And it's just, it could be a long winter for the Democratic Party. They're not going to take back the Senate in the midterms. They're probably not going to take back the House. So you're really talking about, and I've done the math on it, it's virtually mathematically impossible for them to take back the Senate. Pretty difficult for them to take back the House. So you're talking about potentially 4 years of unmitigated GOP power. This party is about to have its ass handed to them, and if they don't get their act together, man, we were talking about the death of the Republicans not a couple months ago. Dude, we could be witnessing the end of the Democratic Party, because there is still very visible division lines, fault lines from that raw feelings from that election.
Yeah.
And they don't seem like they want to fix it.
The Democrats haven't done anything wrong. It was the Russians, okay? The Russians are the culprit here. let's not look at anything that our own party has done wrong. Not my party, but I'm just saying. Yeah, I mean, they're more apt to blame Putin than to accept their own shortcomings, and that, to me, is both highly stupid, but also kind of like, I'm kind of like happy about that, because I'm like, you know what? These parties need to get imploded anyway. Let's fast track this implosion, and let's let the Democrats pretend like they haven't messed up or that they don't need to evolve or anything. I'm kind of like, okay, let's let the Democrats be that dinosaur that starts becoming extinct, and maybe there's a new actual leftist party that comes in and starts being maybe an anti-imperialist left or something that's not based on neoliberal economics and SJW social issues. I mean, it's just like blows my mind that these people have not come to grips with the failure that they've done throughout this election, losing to a guy like Donald Trump, who is overwhelmingly unfavorable and unpopular. And I mean, geez, Clinton won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. That she still lost. That's how bad he was.
Those were dead illegals, Nick. Those weren't real people.
Oh man, it's just shit show, big shit show. Meanwhile, we got Donald Trump coming into office. Let's talk about the good and the bad. First of all, we're supposed to have a guest on that was at the protests in D.C., journalist, but I'm having trouble getting him online, so we're gonna see if he calls in. I'm not sure if he will, but we're gonna wait and see what happens. Until that happens, let's talk about what's gone on since the inauguration, because some pretty interesting things have happened politically. First of all, the anti-Trump protests basically outnumbered the inauguration numbers. By far, dude. In San Diego, which is where we're located, they had like 40,000 people show up. I've been involved in San Diego activism for a really long time, and the biggest protest we've ever held here was 2,000 people. We had 40,000 show up, which is huge compared to what we've ever dealt with.
That's a huge jump from 2,000 to 40.
Yeah, dude, really big. And basically, from what I've been reading, the reports all around the country is that these were the biggest protests that these cities have ever seen. In fact, I saw one article that said this was the biggest coordinated march in U.S. history. It was actually bigger than the 60s.
I've seen that too. I went to the one in Portland, and the numbers I had was between 50 and 100,000 people went, which is an extraordinary number, especially when you consider that the population of the city is 600,000. So approximately 1/6 of Portland marched.
Wow, dude, that's just insane numbers, man. And so, the point I want to get to here is that, Trump he's got opposition, and there's clearly like two separate veins of thought in the United States, of course. And again, this goes back to the issue that we were talking about at the beginning of the show, that these two veins of thought are maybe they're outdated and maybe they're not the best way that we should be addressing our issues. But there's definitely two separate Americas at this point. There's the conservative and the liberal America, and they're two separate things, and they hate each other supposedly. And it just tells me that there's a huge disunity, man. I'm seriously concerned that the United States is no longer got the social cohesion to hold itself together. The atmosphere is growing ripe for secession, and maybe even possibly like civil war, because this is the precursors that we're seeing happen right now. So I think this is very interesting. I think we're being joined by our special guest, Danny Quest now. What's up, Danny? You there?
Yeah, I'm here. What's up, guys?
Thank
you for having me. Can you hear me? Am I coming in clear?
Yep, we got you.
Hey,
awesome.
Danny.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, dude. So you were down at the protests, the inauguration protests in D.C., right?
Yes.
So, I mean, tell us a little bit about it. You weren't there for the Women's March. You were there on Friday, right?
Yeah, I was there on Friday. I left Saturday morning.
Okay, so I mean, tell us about what you saw down there. I mean, what was the mood? I mean, what were people saying? What do you think? What are the headwinds that are going on with the protesters?
I got there. I pulled into McPherson Square. I took the metro in. I got off McPherson Square Park. I walked out of the metro about 10 minutes after the limo was burning and the Starbucks and um, what is it, Bank of America was windows were busted out. I actually found out that was a bipartisan building too that specializes in like deep state activity, which is very interesting. I tried to put some connections together that maybe that was a publicity stunt to take a legitimacy away from the protesters. But I think it was an actual legitimate black bloc organizational thing, and I think they just showed up early. Once black bloc, once I would say it was about a group of maybe 200 kids, mostly college age white kids that were dressed in all black, that were causing the majority of the problems earlier in the day. And once the police had essentially chased them around, they set up what's called a kettle, and they had consolidated all the protesters into about a 2 square block area. And at that point, it becomes like all the rest of the protest where there's different groups of people, where you have like the Rainbow Gathering group, and you have the Black Bloc, the Socialist Workers Party, you have your anarchist group. And I was writing an article just recently, and I got a YouTube video I put out called protesting as a black bloc party. And what I meant by that is when you go to these protests, it's a lot like a block party. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're here, man.
Oh, sorry, it got quiet. It reminds me of like the neighborhood parties I used to go to in DC. In the south side of DC, that have these big block parties, and instead of trash cans burning, it would literally be like a trash can with a fire in it. You know what I'm saying? Instead of a newspaper thing. And I think what the police did was smart, in the sense that they put all the protesters, and it wasn't huge. It was nowhere near as big as even the DNC was bigger, and the Women's March was surely much bigger. I would say at maximum there was 5,000 protesters in a 2 square block area, and for the most part it was peaceful. I mean, there's a lot of yelling, there's a lot of dissidents, people burning things and venting their frustrations in different ways. But I don't think that it was a constructive or collective methodology to actually protest and enact change. Some of the speeches, the actual organized part of it, the Josh Fox's speech, and some of the other activist organizations for Standing Rock and more, the legitimate ones, had some nice presentations. But once it got dark, it just evolved into kids acting crazy, kind of. One of the craziest group of people there that I saw was actually probably high school kids, 16 to 18 years old, local, all from DC, and they were just basically celebrating the fact that they didn't have any rules.
Interesting, very interesting. So, I mean, what do you make of? You said you got there briefly after the property.
I was so scared of getting back to sleep.
Place, and I know there's like varying different, and some people think rioting is just a huge problem and that it excuses the cops to use heavy-handed, actions. Other people think, destruction of property is a legitimate form of protest. I mean, what do you think about that?
There's definitely a legitimate form of non-violent direct action. And what I mean by that is when cops are trying to corral or cattle a protest or a demonstration into a specific area, there's tactics that you can take to remedy that, like burning tires or trash. What you're doing is setting up a line. So tactics like that are legitimate. You can take revolutions like the revolution in Haiti, for example. The revolution in Haiti was a militaristic, a revolution against an oppressive colony. a colony occupation that they had to mount up and forcefully remove from their country. If the Palestinians were to have the opportunity and resources to rise up militaristically or forcefully take themselves out of their oppression, they should. But a lot of times that route is not really available to us. So I would highly recommend to young activists and young demonstrators to read things like Rules for Radicals and Direct Action. Like, there's books that talk about how to use these specific strategies, these non-violent, forceful strategies, passive, non-aggressive strategies that do work to counteract the state's actions against us.
And so, that's what's funny. So, a lot of times there's peaceful protests, big peaceful protests. They don't make news, right? There's no headlines. There's nobody, talking about it. But then all of a sudden, when the protest turns violent, it's like, this is the top story. I mean, do you see like a correlation here? Like, a peaceful protest.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
And all of a sudden, it's a huge media story.
There's two main factions. The police use, what do they call, like, plants or they base, what is the word for it when they implant someone into a provocateur. So of course there's police provocateurs, right? And the police provocateurs work in different ways. They want to delegitimize the message of the protesters, or they want to draw out the violent members of the protesters. So all you do is you have a cop or somebody who's trained by intelligence infiltrate the group and then say, all right, guys, let's burn this car. And then everybody that follows him gets arrested. So it's kind of a technique to remove those assets from within the organization. And there's also a media technique where, like you just said, the media's main goal, especially the mainstream media, not the independent media, not us, is to make money. That's why they exist. They don't exist to give us information. They exist to make money and to manipulate us. And if the riot is not, or if a protest is not reaching their standards of viewership, if they don't feel like it's going to make people come to their channel or their news organization, then yes, they will create the story. They will pay protesters. They will pay provocateurs. They will pay people to destroy things and light things on fire just for the shot. Interesting thing, right after the limo fire, InfoWars caught that, all that footage of the limo being lit on fire, the kids rushing the police line, all that was caught. But as soon as it was over, all the mainstream media left. Like, they had got their shots. They were done for the day. So, that goes straight into the point that you were just talking about. There was a good group of major organizations that once the limo was done burning, once all the bad kids were locked up, they decided to pack up and leave. So, like you just said.
So, one thing I've noticed for sure is that, like, peaceful protests are pretty much ignored. I remember thinking back to, like, the first Million Mask March on DC. I'm trying to remember when that was. I think it was like 3 years ago. It could have been 4 years ago. We covered it on the anti-media, but it went completely blacked out on the mainstream media. And the other thing about it was that it was pretty much completely peaceful. And so it definitely seems to me like the media tends to completely ignore activist movements until they become violent, and then the violence becomes the main story. Thinking back to, like, the protests in Ferguson and Baltimore, the protests were 98% peaceful and huge crowds, sometimes 10,000 people showing up in Baltimore protesting peacefully. No media coverage. But then as soon as something gets broken or a building lit on fire, that's the story. So I guess the question I have is it a legitimate tactic? Let's pretend that they're
I can elaborate on that, Nick.
We're not talking about provocateurs. Let's pretend we're not talking about agitators. Is lighting shit on fire a legitimate tactic to gain media attention from an activist perspective?
Oh, no, it's negative attention. That's not going to bring help to your cause. That's going to bring people who want to burn shit up. And if you want to bring people that want to burn shit up, I would recommend using the dark web and starting like an underground militia group or something like that. Something that's actually formulated to be the force of the movement. You get what I'm saying? Like if your purpose is to be a righteous warrior, if you will, and that there is a need for that in what's coming, in the duality battle that we have. There's a definite need for righteous warriors that are willing to stand up physically and denounce and protect those of us who are pacifist and who follow the non-aggression principles, right? To elaborate on what you were just saying, there's a lot of examples of times where both, like you were saying, people were ignored. One of the most prominent recent examples I can remember is the Million Muslim March against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, I believe, that had over 1 million people. It was as big as the Million Woman March that just happened in DC. So they're all blowing out of proportion how big this Million Woman March is. And the funniest joke I heard, I want to throw out real quick, is that Donald Trump's already been more successful at getting fat women to walk than Michelle Obama and Oprah combined. That's pretty funny.
Horrible.
But what I was saying is that the media never mentioned anything about Muslims marching against ISIS for peace, and there was more than 1 million of them, right? But there was none of this. Oh, there's so many. The numbers are so big. We haven't seen protests like this since the Arab Spring. No. Only when it's everybody in pink, and Go Pink is a government-funded organization that directly, funds Planned Parenthood and claims to be curing cancer. When we all know there's already dozens of cures for cancer, but Mr. Planned Pink and the little ribbons and everybody that's involved in the formalization of these movements, they just reap the benefits of it. They're not actually social activist groups and organization groups. They're quasi corporations. They're
an interesting point about this. I remember this story about this huge Muslim march, millions of people, and it was like an anti-violence march. It wasn't like per se specifically about ISIS, but it was just a condemnation of terrorism and violence.
Right. Exactly.
In the world. And the media, when someone like Donald Trump comes along and says, "Oh, we're gonna ban Muslims and we're gonna make a Muslim registry," the media jumps on. It's like, "Oh my God, he's so xenophobic. I can't believe that he's saying this." And then when 1 million Muslims march against terrorism, it's like, "Oh, nah, that's not newsworthy." So there's like a major hypocrisy, a disconnect in the media, because the media plays a role of dehumanizing Muslims, but at the same time has to pretend that it's not dehumanizing Muslims. And ever since 9/11, I mean, the media has been dehumanizing Muslims like 24 hours a day. That's why there's so many people in the United States that are xenophobic. That's why part of the reason why Donald Trump won was because ever since 9/11, the media has been dehumanizing Muslims to be able to justify the war on terror.
Without a doubt.
How are you going to kill 1 million Iraqis after 9/11 without dehumanizing them first? You can't, because the people aren't going to accept 500,000 dead Iraqi children just because. First, you have to dehumanize them. So the media has done this great job, horrible, but great job of dehumanizing Muslims. And then when a guy like Donald Trump comes along and is openly xenophobic, they're, "Oh my God, I can't believe he's saying this stuff. It's bullshit. It's bullshit."
It's Ronald Reagan all over again. It's Ford Reagan. It's what happened in the 60s when they dehumanized African Americans and tried to say that black people weren't equal and didn't have the same rights as other people, and they created all these institutions. Even if they were covert institutions that still exist today, the school to prison complex, the war on drugs, things like this were created for the same reasons that these anti-terrorism police state security apparatus is created. It's essentially, the way I describe it is, white America is taking on the moral responsibility for the failure of the American state. And what I mean by that is the failure, they're taking the failure of America personally, and they're lashing it out as a threat onto white people, white nationalism, European culture, You know what I mean? So they're willing to stand up militaristically, violently, nationally to protect what is failing, thinking that they're directly associated to it. It's impossible for statists to remove themselves from the state. So the failure of the state becomes the personal responsibility of middle-class white America. They're not racist against blacks and Muslims. They're just trying to protect their failing state. And that's the only way that their biology tells them to do it, is by tribalizing together. Does that make sense? At least that's how I see it, with a big part of the white nationalist movement, the neo-nationalist movement, and all these things. And they're all also co-opted by Zionism as part of a larger plan, and the Third World War, and all that gets into really deep level conspiracy and researcher stuff. But another topic, a key ingredient, what I think you were touching on, is the way the media polarizes America, right? And I think they specifically choose polarizing narratives through poll research. So they have like a poll research center do a research poll on, all right, what is the most polarizing, equalizing thing? And the easiest way to keep Americans in control is to keep us fighting 49% to 49%. That way we're always at war with each other, and we can never empower ourselves against the government that oppresses us. And I think they pick things like gay marriage and abortion and these kind of issues specifically for that reason. If you study the ownership of media, there's this big idea that Fox and CNN are mortal enemies, right? Like they're somehow against each other and they're fundamentally opposed in their ideologies. But in reality, they want the same things for America. They're working towards the same agendas and the same policies. They just do it in a way that polarizes the people and creates a duality, because that duality benefits them. Like you were just saying earlier about the media, right? The media demonizing Muslims as part of a larger geopolitical agenda. Even CNN demonizes Muslims, right? You would think that, it's the uber liberal equality channel and it's the one that's the farthest on the left, but in reality they're demonizing Muslims in the same way, just using more bright, flamboyant, colorful, soft language. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, man, I definitely see what you're saying. It's a pretty interesting theory on this phenomenon of white nationalism that's rising, and that kind of leads me into my next question that I want to bring out here, because like I said, we're trying to push this show into more of a direction of philosophy and stuff. I really like the way we're going so far tonight. First I got to introduce my longtime co-host, DB Schwartz. What's up, dude?
Oh, not much, Nick. Just late and busy up here for some weird reason. So
you're not alone, man. The whole country is busy as hell right now trying to figure out what the hell is going on. First, I want to go back to Jake. And, Jake, do you think riots are a legit form of protest? Have riots accomplished anything in the past? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know the history enough to say, with confidence whether riots work. Do I think they're a legitimate form of protest? Of course. You have, in many cases, forcible occupation of public space by the corporate state and by the police state. What other means do people have of reclaiming the mental and physical environment besides riots? If they're bringing the violence, the police state is bringing the violence, the corporate state is bringing the violence by flooding our mental environment with toxicity. One of the only ways that we can fight back sometimes is with physical violence. If they're not going to listen to words, which they don't, they're going to have to listen to something else. I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me, but I don't give a frog's fat ass about private property when you're talking about a nation of people being oppressed.
I tend to agree to a degree on riots, because it looks back through at a historical context. I mean, riots have led to reforms. In Ferguson, it led to a bunch of actions. Now, have the police been demilitarized? No. But have there been reforms to the Ferguson police? Yes. Would there have been reforms if there were just a couple hundred peaceful protesters? Probably not. We've had a bunch of peaceful protests here in San Diego about the police because the police here killed like 150 people, law enforcement altogether, in the past several. I think it's been like in the past decade that they've been keeping track of it. But, a lot of people get killed by law enforcement here in San Diego, Border Patrol, cops, sheriffs, those kind of things. We've had a lot of peaceful protests and almost zero reform, and so I would say in some cases, of course, not always, I think sometimes riots do accomplish something. Now, do I think that the destruction of property in D.C. over the weekend or on Friday is going to accomplish something? I don't think so. Probably not.
I think it has to be strategic destruction of property. If you're going to destroy property, it should be property affiliated with multinational corporations that are part of the problem and not just random stores.
So right. McDonald's and Starbucks was a good choice then.
Right. I totally agree with that. The banks, I mean, what better target could there be besides one of the big banks? And McDonald's, I'm sorry. I mean, I can't have any sympathy for that. It's about message making. However, whatever it takes to make people in charge realize that there are people out there who want nothing more than to change the system, whatever it takes to get that message across.
Interesting prospect, man. So on this topic, and here's where I wanna go with this, because besides this destruction of property and stuff, the big thing that people have been talking about in my circle is this Nazi dude. I don't know what we're calling him. He's a white nationalist. I don't know. Is he a neo-Nazi?
Richard Spencer.
The guy. That black genocide is a legitimate topic, basically. So I mean, very, very incendiary. Hey, Danny, you mute the mic? We're getting some background noise from you. I'll come to you in a sec. First, I want to go to DB. DB, this topic with the people that I know. Does this white nationalist dude, what's his name, Richard Spencer? I can't even remember his name. Maybe we shouldn't even say his name to not give him publicity. Does he deserve, quote unquote, free speech, or is the guy that decked him in the face, did he do the right thing? I mean, what do you think, DB?
Well, he deserves free speech unless nobody deserves it, and that's really what this is all about. That's the whole root of it. And that's what these protests are about. It's to get the extreme left to start violently reacting, and that way they can take everybody's rights and privileges away. So it's not hard to see. As far as is it right if the guy got hit in the face? Sure, why not? I mean, he seems like he's pretty much a douche, so if you punch douchebags in the face, that's always a good thing, right?
It's not just that he's a douche. He advocates for ethnic cleansing and eliminating a race. That's a form.
There's guys in the Black Panther Party right now that are talking that crap too, but because of one reason or another, that's okay. So, any way it goes, the guy's a douchebag. Anybody like him is, anybody spouting off that kind of stuff is, because that's you create a race war, and we create a genocide here in the U.S. And again, what they want. So stop playing into that.
So do you think maybe it was staged?
No, it's not staged. I mean, well, it's staged in so much as they got it on video, and people have been wanting to do that for a long time. But people have been wanting to beat up probably half the news personalities that were at that, march and protest organizations. I mean, there was people in the mainstream media that got hot coffee thrown on them and stuff. So there was just a lot of hate to go around.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should clarify my position. This is a really tough issue, and Nick, I think you said that it falls in the gray area. I have KKK members who are peacefully march. They have the right to say what they want. I do think you possibly can start drawing the line when your rhetoric is mobilizing people to kill others. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, isn't that beyond first of all, is there such a thing as peaceful ethnic cleansing? Like, what would that entail, actually? Because that's what he advocates.
Forced migration. I mean, that's what a lot of people don't know their history. But if Abraham Lincoln hadn't have been shot, he was trying to push everybody into Liberia. So there's one way or another. There's forced getting along or there's mass forced migration, one or the other.
But I mean, if you're talking about forced migration, unless you're talking about illegal immigrants, that's a form of violence.
Exactly. That's not peaceful ethnic cleansing at all. If you're forcing someone to do anything, that's violence. So this idea of peaceful ethnic cleansing, which I've seen several people saying, oh, well, he's a peaceful guy. He's advocating peaceful ethnic cleansing. No, you're advocating the use of violent force to move people out of their homes to make room for your white homies. That's not peaceful at all. And so maybe I shouldn't have said free speech, because free speech is different. Free speech is the government has to respect the individual's right to say what he wants, regardless of how messed up it is. I completely agree with that. I don't think the government should be censoring white nationalists. I don't think the government should be censoring black nationalists. I don't think the government should be censoring Nazis. But at the same time, I don't walk outside and go tell somebody something really bad that is probably going to provoke a reaction and then act surprised when I get punched in the face. That's the thing. Like, free speech is between the government and the individual. Free speech has nothing to do between several individuals.
Exactly. You should always be willing to take the responsibilities for your actions and or words. And that goes on the internet especially, because scrub all you may, anybody can dig up if it's attached to you at any time. So, I mean, yeah, free speeches should always be protected. Getting punched in the face because you're a douchebag, that should always be protected too.
Oh, man. All right. Danny, we only got about 2.5 more minutes. I want your thoughts on this real quick, and then we're going to close out the show here.
All right. Since I follow the NAP as much as possible, and what I mean by that is the non-aggression principles. I think ideas can be fought with other ideas, right? So if somebody has an opinion that's wrong, opinion of a douche or a dick or a racist, then a valid opinion of a logical, reasonable philosopher should be able to destroy that person's credibility without ever touching them. I think that the white supremacist that got punched in the face, he did not see that coming. Get the pun. And I think that it didn't help the puncher's cause. It made the person getting punched more popular.
Yeah.
Right. So how does that work as a legitimate method to undermine somebody's ideology if your action actually brings more popularity? I won't say credibility, but I'll say popularity, attention to that cause. You're not delegitimizing it. You're actually propping it up. And that's one of the examples of where violence, as a methodology actually fails in regards to a nonviolent maneuver. One of the things we talk about, what compels average people to take the side of the oppressed, right? What brings people's attention to the protesters' issues, to the activist issues? And a lot of times, historically, what has happened is somebody who has been either killed, arrested, beaten non-violently. They have resisted. They have stayed there, non-violently, like Gandhi and the salt mines. Any of these people.
The civil rights era in the 60s.
So what was that college? The college where they killed the college kids, or the place in Philadelphia, the MOVE building. All these, well, that was a more violent uprising, but there's definitely a lot of examples historically of what has turned the tides of the oppressor against the oppressed was the oppressor overstepping its physical boundaries on morality and ethics. And that overstep is what caused society to take a more drastic look at the authoritarian regime, or at the the oppressive system, whatever it may be, that was enacting it.
Very interesting perspective, man. Thank you for joining us tonight, and a great show tonight, guys. We're going to be pushing further in this direction of philosophy. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to be back on here Wednesday. Anti-Media Radio, though, is on 5 days a week, same place, same time here in East New York.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yo, here we go through the stereo.